starting with Kyritsi from the Center for Conflict Resolution, who you may be starting to maybe want to nap after all of that lunch, and she will wake you up. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Brett. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first in-person Philly orientation in a really long time. Hello, people on the internet. I know that you're there. I have a few things where I'm going to try to remember that you're there, but the Philly staff have promised to give me like a big wavy signal if I'm only teaching the people in the room. So welcome, everybody. I know that you've had a very long day with a lot of listening. So what's exciting about this afternoon is we're actually going to talk about listening for a little bit. My time with you is 60 minutes, but I'm going to tell you who I am and why I'm here, and then we're going to get started and we're going to be doing some exercises and some engagement with each other. So I am the programs director at the Center for Conflict Resolution. We are Chicago's community mediation center. So CCR has been around since 1979, longer than most of the people on the staff. And we started out as the young lawyer section of the Chicago Bar Foundation started this group, and it was called Neighborhood Justice Chicago, which I love because it sounds like a vigilante group. And it was a little tiny storefront in Uptown. And the idea was, you and me, we're neighbors, we've got beef. I'm like, all right, Adam, let's take this down to neighborhood justice. We're going to settle this in mediation. And we would do that. That was the idea, right? So they did like 3 cases in 2 years, because guess what? That's not how people work. That's not how conflict works. It didn't work as planned. So, which is how you work?
That's not how Uptown works.
It's not how Uptown works. It's not how Uptown worked in the 70s. So, but what they learned was that we really needed to have different types of relationships to get the types of cases we were looking for. But really what that young lawyer section was looking at was they had cases where you've got a neighbor dispute, you're representing a client, they win. Your client wins. Great. This is where the property line is. Your client wins. Guess what? Ray still putting her garbage cans in front of your neighbor's driveway, right? Like, so what you won in court. Guess what? That doesn't work all the time. You're in law school, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't end the conflict, right? It doesn't end the inherent conflict that the parties might be feeling and experiencing. We learned that the court is able to resolve legal matters in legal ways, but the court is not well suited to think about all of the ways in which people harm each other, disappoint each other, right? I've seen people in like condo neighbor disputes lay down on the table and cry when I said, what has the impact of all this been on you? Because they've been in a 3-year fight about who was responsible for the cost of an air conditioner, right? And now it's the principle of the thing. And I said, what has the impact of this been on you? And she said, I don't sleep. Have you ever been in a fight with someone you share a home or a living space with? It's a nightmare, right? And if you're a lawyer or you're thinking about being a lawyer, well, you've gotten here and you're wandering problem solver, which means you also might obsess over a fight, right? I never stand in a courtroom and argue for people. The only time in my work that I end up like doing that sort of thing is if I'm helping out like a friend or a family member. My mom's an independent contractor. 5 years ago, she got into a dispute with an employer. Sometimes I still lay in bed at night and think of what else I should have said to her in that demand letter, right? We obsess over conflict. Also, you might be conflict avoidant because sometimes we choose to do a thing professionally that we're not very good at in our personal lives. I know a lot of mediators who are so bad at interpersonal conflict. Also, those who can't teach. So a lot of trainers too, when it comes to this sort of skills. So I've been with the Center for Conflict Resolution for 12 years. I started as a volunteer mediator when I was in law school and went to Loyola. And then I joined the staff the Monday after the bar exam. Great time to start a job. And then 9 years ago, I became the director of the program. So we have 22 different mediation programs where we help people resolve all different types of conflict. I'm also an adjunct faculty at Loyola where I teach professional identity formation, mediation, and alternative dispute resolution. And I give you my resume because I think you deserve to know who's standing at the front of the room talking to you. So today we're going to talk about the kinds of skills that are really, really helpful for conflict management. At the end of our hour together, you will not be a mediator. You will not be, that's not the expectation. That's not where we're headed. But the fact is you are about to go into a new environment, right, that has its own culture. You're going to be working with clients. Some of you will be in direct services. I know that when I was a 7-11 doing direct services in law school, I had some of the hardest conversations of my life, right? You have a person who is in absolute distress in front of you. You're supposed to be their lifeline, and you kind of can't, right? You're like, actually, I just need to complete this form, right? That's a really hard place to be in. As they say about law students, right, you know, just enough to be dangerous. Also, people 10 years out, I feel like I know just enough to be dangerous, right? Like the only thing I remember is like what an easement is, but I don't remember anything else about property law. So, and I learned it when I took the bar, not in property, by the way. So the thing is that you know, you're gonna find yourselves maybe not in conflicts. I hope not in conflicts, but you are gonna have challenging conversations this summer. You're gonna have them in your career. You're gonna have them professionally. And someday you're going to be in charge of other people. And thinking about how to have conversations, what skill set we need to do that really well, are the types of things I want us to touch on in today's workshop. So the first thing we're gonna talk about active listening. We're going to talk about summarizing and reflective listening skills. We're going to talk about effective questions, and we're going to talk about emotions. It's all in the handout because some people are handout people. I don't expect you to take notes or do anything. I expect you to show up and be present. Turns out it's 60% of life. So, and for those of you that are on Zoom, I can't see you, so it doesn't matter. Turn your camera on. So the first thing I want to talk about is active listening. So really quick to just kind of demonstrate a little bit about what active listening looks like. I'm going to call on you, if I may.
Betsy.
Betsy. Okay. So Betsy, can you tell me a little bit about what your placement is going to be this summer?
I'm at the Center for Disability and Elder Law.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I did a training on power of attorney. And then in the afternoon, I went to a community clinic.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. How are we all feeling? Was that comfortable? It's a little uncomfortable, right? What's happening? What's happening for you? How are you feeling?
Not listened to.
Not listened to. Any other words we might use in there? Does it feel like I respect you?
No.
Because that feels like a nightmare to me to do to you, right? Because it right? Yeah.
Awkward.
It feels awkward for sure. Yeah. What was I doing that was not great for listening? Anybody? Call it out. I was on my phone. I was on my watch. What else did I do?
Not making eye contact.
No eye contact. Got a couple of yawns in there.
Interrupted her.
What did I do?
Interrupted her.
I interrupted her. My older sister does that. That's why I always put it in. She'd be so mad if she knew that. But it's like her listening tick. Mine's okay. Okay. She goes, I'm like, you're not listening. You're in the fridge, you know, you're not listening. Yeah. Let's back it up. Let's try again. Betsy, please tell me about your placement this summer.
I'm at the Center for Disability and Elder Law.
What kind of things are you going to do there?
Guardianship, a lot of property law, which I was not expecting.
Okay.
So definitely talking about landlord-tenant issues. What else? I did a power of attorney training last week, and then I filled out some power of attorney documents and then explained it to people. That's about it. A lot of intakes.
Okay. A lot of direct services?
Yeah.
Okay.
Services.
Great.
Yeah.
How was that? Everybody feeling a little better? Yeah, I'm not a monster, right? Yeah. So Betsy, what was different for you in that experience that we were having together?
It felt like we were talking to each other. You asked me a question and then I responded. It didn't feel as awkward.
Yeah. How was my body language? Was it different or the same? It's not a trick question. It was different. What was different? It was still. Yeah, I wasn't kind of moving away, right? I didn't check my phone. I didn't yawn, even though I also have that 2:30 afternoon feeling, right? I was like present and listening, and I was able to ask a question that kind of reflected back, right? Part of what she was saying, which I can do if I understand what's being said, and I can also do if I don't understand what's being said, right? I can say, oh, so you know, you said you had done intakes, and I said, oh, so it's direct client service, right? Because I know what an intake at Cedal is, right? If I didn't, I could say, what are you doing in the intakes, right? I'm asking a question, I'm using your vocabulary back to you, but it shows you that I'm engaged, right? What are other ways that we demonstrate good active listening? Uh-oh, you stretched back there. Do you have one?
I guess like asking like the right kind of follow-up question.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that?
Like not that you're following a script, but that you're actually responding.
Absolutely, absolutely. If Betsy says, I'm going to be at Seattle, and I say, where do you have lunch today? We are not, I mean, I'm asking a question, but we're not on the same page, right? Yeah, everybody has a friend like that asks this question out of here, right? Yeah, absolutely. What else? What else tells you someone's listening? Yeah.
I think like beyond like just the body language, like the way that you facially emote should be like kind of trying to align in some way with the tone of the conversation. So if it's something serious, you shouldn't be like smiling strangely or something.
How are these working for us when we're trying to do that kind of stuff? How did the masks impact that? Betsy's, just for the folks on the screen, Betsy is wearing a mask and I was not, I was presenting, right? So what is the impact? You just watched me talk for a few minutes with the mask off. I have a mask on. How is my face? Can you see as much of it? Is it impacting it? You certainly can't. This is silly. But yeah, bless you in the back. Yeah. So yeah, your facial expressions, they need to be accurate, right? And then I think if you're one-on-one with people, everybody's masked up, you gotta have like really expressive eyes. You know, you gotta, right? It's your smizing, right? You gotta keep it in this part of the face for sure. Yeah. We're gonna talk a little bit more about having an appropriate response to what someone is emoting later, but it's the same kind of, and it goes to this same notion of active listening, that you've got to be responding to what's actually happening in the moment, right? Yeah, what else? How else do we show that we're listening?
Tone of voice.
Tone of voice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what else?
Summarizing.
Summarizing, yeah, that's a great skill. You got to be careful not to overuse it though. I use it constantly, and in my work, when we're scheduling people for mediations, we like bring our mediator skills to the table. It's kind of like they get a little bit of a practice of this is what it'll be like to have someone who's neutral listening to you. And I had a woman once say, are you going to repeat everything I said back to me? And I was like, well, not anymore. You know, I mean, I was, but I guess not, right? Yeah.
And summarizing to make sure you can understand it was like, I hear you saying this, did you mean this?
Yeah, it depends on what you're summarizing for. I'm gonna talk about summarizing in more detail in a minute, but I want to talk about one more thing that impacts active listening, right? Which is not just the mask thing, but then also taking into consideration if we're virtual or we're in person, right? So I think that's had a huge impact. So I've done this presentation at the Paleo Luncheon for a number of years. It was in person. In the last 2 years, I did it virtually. And so I added this slide that was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing now? So, you know, you've been alive and functioning through this pandemic. You see different iterations. I'm sure in your work, you're going to do some virtual stuff, some in-person stuff, some phone stuff. How do you show that you are actively listening when you're on the screen? Any thoughts about that? Also, if you want to chime in and you're on a screen right now, I'm going to volunteer the staff, Abby, who's in the back. You can pop something into the chat and we can get it read out loud too. Yeah.
Yeah, I found what a barrier I found to communication online on Zoom, for example, is that people mute themselves when they're not talking. So you're just, this is very meta. If you just say like, that's useful. But if like, you know, if everyone else is muted, then you like have no idea what's going on. It's very disconcerting. So I try to unmute and not talk too much, but maybe I'll like say, or laugh at a joke or something.
Yeah, do this lecture to 75 empty black boxes. It's just like shouting into the nothing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've taught online for a lot of the pandemic. I was teaching online and I've done other presentations online, and you're right, there's that silence and maybe even people's cameras are off, right? And I think we have to strike a balance between like what I need as the person who's speaking, which is, it is so good to see your face looking at me. And maybe that person doesn't feel safe to put their camera on. Maybe they need a break from being on Zoom. Maybe they're trying to tell you something that's really hard to say, and it's actually easier to turn their camera off. We do all our mediations on Zoom now. We had a Zoom mediation program we started in 2017. We've done about a dozen cases before the pandemic came. Very early in the pandemic, we had a parent, a mom and a dad. They're co-parenting. They're no longer in a relationship. They're there to talk about their parenting plan. And the dad got so mad, he said, I don't even want to look at you. And then he turned his camera off, which is hilarious, right? Because it doesn't change his ability to look at her, right? But the mediator, who was a very experienced mediator, said, you know what, that's a great idea. Let's all take a break from looking at each other. Let's all turn our cameras off. And they were able to keep talking, but like kind of bring that tension down. So a sort of an unintended beneficial consequence of the thing that you're talking about that's very real is sometimes if you can have a little less interaction, a little less intimacy, it's a little cooler of a dynamic, right? You all love me more than you do because we're in the room together. Sometimes that can be really helpful if the conversation you have to have is hard. So if you have the option to like play with camera on, camera off, mute, unmute in the work that you're doing, I recommend that you try it. I think you can be really thoughtful about it in different ways. Anything else that comes up when you're thinking about using a virtual platform in an advantageous way or something we should be cautious of? Yeah.
I feel like because faces are smaller, I use my hands more. So if someone says, can you hear me? Everybody goes like this.
Thumbs up were never a part of my life. You know what I mean? Like they just weren't. And now I am pressing them on the keyboard all the time and they're on Slack. Yeah, for sure, for sure. You end up gesturing, communicating in other ways. Yeah.
I guess we don't talk about this, but I, for one, find it infinitely harder to remain focused on like a computer than when solely in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very real, right? I went to college so long ago that my last semester of college, one girl in one class got special permission from the professor to bring a laptop in. So think about that. That's how long ago I went to college. And we all got it kicked out because she was playing solitaire and it was very distracting in a French existentialism course. So that, but when I went to law school 7 years after I'd finished college and everything was on a computer, I was like buying boots and on GChat and then I was like, oh, didn't learn today, right? Like when you have the computer in front, yeah, we all know, by the way, but when you have that computer in front, you have the internet, right? Like at your disposal, it is a lot hard. Why don't you post out your phone right now? I'm going to see it, right? Like it's a lot harder, I think, to focus, right? When you're on the screen. And I think, some ways that people do it right is you minimize and silence everything else. You make that screen. Or for me, suddenly I'm a preening bird. I'm like only looking at myself on the screen, right? I have to hide myself if I want to focus. Yeah. We have a question from the internet.
So someone in the chat, I think possibly in response to the comment about knowing when to mute or unmute,
yeah,
that sort of thing, mentioned one way to show that you are listening is to engage in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. That was also very meta. Yeah, no, the chat can be really, really effective, right? That can be, and it's nice when you see a facilitator or an instructor like use that chat engagement really well. But sometimes I think if you just are a person who's using it well, people start to pick up on it. Like you can start to build that as a tool for communication. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that part about being distracted is so real for all of us, right? And it's real all the time because I am in a relationship with my phone. I realize I don't know where it is. I'm starting to panic. It must be around here somewhere, right? Like, actually, I don't know where it is. I'm sure I'll find. Hold on. We'll just check real quick. Make sure Brent didn't take it. We all have our devices and things. One isn't even working. Wasn't I using it?
Yeah, you used it as an example.
I used it as an example. Right? It's my favorite thing. I'm a married person. This is my primary relationship. Right? It's easy not to be distracted by it. It's easy to like think about the device, and all those other things, right? So when we want to be actively listening, we need to focus up. So one of the skills that absolutely gets us there is mindfulness, right? Like being intentional about how we show up in spaces. That experience that we have when we're in a class, a lecture or whatever, and you're just like, 17 more minutes, right? Like I can't possibly, right? That if you are focused and paying attention, even if you're bored about what's being said, that time will move faster, right? Than if you're like making a hash mark every minute, counting down how much time you have left in the room. So I want to talk about how we ask questions, because in talking about active listening, we highlighted a number of things that are important skills to do that. How we ask questions, which I demonstrated with Betsy, summarizing, things like that. So there are two primary types of questions. We have open questions and closed questions. Anybody know what either of those are? Cool, I do, it's totally fine. So an open question, and a closed question really is anything where the answer is gonna be yes, no, or never, right? Did you graduate law school this year? No. Did you graduate law school this year? Yes, right? That's a pretty closed question. Where'd you go to law school? Also kind of a closed question. It's gonna have a one answer. Why did you go to law school? Gonna have a much bigger answer. That's an open question, right? So closed questions are fixed. Their answers are very small and specific. Open questions, we get much bigger opportunity for response, right? Where is your placement, which is what I asked Betsy earlier, you know, is technically a closed question, but because I kept giving the body language of like, tell me more about it, we got more information, right, about what was happening. So right now I'm gonna have everybody who's in the room pair up. For those of you who are on Zoom, the pairing up doesn't work, so I'm gonna give you a slightly different cue as we go along. So right now, everyone find a partner. Don't travel far.
I'm James.
I think I've got one eye. Is there anyone else who doesn't have a partner? Oh, here we go. We got it? Does everybody have a partner? Does anyone need a partner? Okay. Everyone is really ready to do partner work, apparently. What are you even talking about? So, okay, so right now, decide who is A and who is B. One of you is A, one of you is B. Decide right now. You don't have to decide. You're going to actually do both parts of the exercise if you're on Zoom.
That seems like, you know,
okay.
less pressure.
So, A, I would like you to find out and wait until I tell you to go, okay? I want you to find out everything you can about B's childhood. You may only ask closed questions. If you're on Zoom, type out, jot down, whatever. What are the questions you would ask if you were asking these questions? So A, you're going to find out as much as you can about B's childhood, only using closed questions. Begin.
Yeah, I kind of stopped in high school.
Did you grow up in a religious household?
Yes, somewhat. It depends like how you define that, right? So, oh, you're too good at asking questions. I mean, it's just less than others. It's focus. This is what I would say. Well, I think it's like one scale of like is there more intensive lesson tests. I think it's just if you in some ways think religious it sounds like you're like friendly, but in some ways it can also be you're more like committed to than you're committed to, right? So like when someone liberal religiously, right? And like thinking about things, those are very committed to what religion were you? I was Jewish. Okay. Yeah.
Take about 30 more seconds.
Did you go to public school?
Yeah, I went to private school, 8th grade, Jewish day school. Yeah, and then Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh. Yeah, that was public high school.
Okay, and stop. We're going to stop there.
You're too good.
So we're going to stop there. We're going to switch. Okay. So now B, you're asking questions. I would like you to find out as much as you can about A's childhood. You may only ask open questions. You may begin. And if you're on Zoom, go ahead and jot down what questions you
What was your what were you like really interested in as a kid?
Growing up, I really liked Legos. I really enjoyed baseball. I really enjoyed movies. I really enjoyed like spending time outdoors.
We'll stop there. Okay. So let's bring it back. So in this exercise, who talked the most, A or B? Both, either, both, when you add them all together, who did most of the talking? A does a lot of talking, right? So A, and you're done kind of with the pairs work. So if you moved, you can head back to your seat. So in the first time around, when we did closed questions, how many questions got asked? A lot, 15. Yeah, how many the second time? None. I just looked at her and then she answered. Yes. How many? Like 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Yeah. So the closed questions, always one of my favorite exercises. One year at this, there was a guy sitting right here. And he was like, did you have 3 brothers? Did you have 4 brothers? Did you have 5 brothers? And he just wanted to get the siblings so badly. Did you have 2 brothers and a sister? Like he was like shouting. It was amazing. It was as if the assignment was figure out how many siblings. You know, like he was just like in it, right? But you didn't hear, right? Like how many siblings did you have? Are they a girl, right? Like we're trying to narrow this stuff down, right? So what's really fascinating about that, right, is that you have to ask so many. It's not really fascinating. I'll get to the fascinating part. What's interesting about it is you have to ask a lot of questions, right? But when we flip it around, we do the open questions. Sometimes people actually get really stuck, and they're like, I don't actually know how to ask only an open question to start. That can be hard, right? What kind of questions got asked? What kind of things did you have?
Tell me about your childhood.
Tell me about your childhood? You just do that with your voice and becomes a question? Yeah. What do you want to? I don't know what you asked, but you were like, I like Legos. I like dogs. You were just like listing things you like, just a list of stuff, which is pretty great. What was the question?
It's like, what were you interested in as a kid?
Yeah, what were you interested in as a kid? Great question. What other questions did we get? Tell me about your childhood is one. It's a cheat, but okay. What else? Yeah.
How did you feel about school as a kid?
How'd you feel about school as a kid? Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
What part of your childhood did you like the most?
Yes. Okay, that's a great example. What part of your childhood did you like the most? Everybody answer it real quick in your head. None of us said I had one sister. Nobody's answer to that question is my favorite part of childhood was the number of siblings I had. It's not the answer to the question. But when you're asking those fixed questions, those closed questions, you're kind of like curating it, which is really interesting. Here's the fascinating part. So when you are asking questions, you are telling things about yourself, okay? Sometimes if there's an odd number, I end up doing this exercise. If I'm asking the closed questions, I always ask, how many parents did you have growing up? What do you know about me? I did not have 2 parents. If I had 2 parents, I wouldn't ask it. Why? Status quo, right? It's the standard, right? I either had 1 or more. The answer is 4, right? But I didn't have 2 parents. You wouldn't ask it. If you had 2 parents, you probably didn't ask it, right? One time I was doing this exercise, and the woman I was working with, she was doing the closed questions, and she said, did you go to a co-ed high school? And I was like, you didn't. I would never ask that. I would never ask that of anybody, right? But she didn't. She'd gone to an all-girls high school, right? And so for her, that, right, was like a curiosity, right? And so that's helpful to remember, because even when we're being curious and sincere, and we don't mean to be asking a leading question, right? Where a leading question is, you're all really enjoying this lecture, right? Right, like that's a leading question. Even when we're not doing something as heavy-handed as that, there's a tell in there, especially when you're asking closed questions, right? What you choose to ask about. The most effective way to get the information you often need from people when you're trying to get good information from them is to ask an open question and then narrow it down, right? If we had asked your question, right? Like what did you like about your childhood? What are your favorite things about your childhood? What would you like to tell me about your childhood, right? And then you say, oh, well, you know, I did competitive piano. Well, then I might ask, but how many years did you play piano? How old were you when you started playing the piano, right? Now I'm asking those closed, responsive questions, right? So this is that idea that came from this area, I think, of like asking a question that's reflective of what's happening. We're not off script. You're not telling me that you were a competitive piano player as a child and I'm like, did you have one sister, right? Like we're right here. We're staying with the topic at hand. And that one has a lot of impact. It's going to get you the information you need. It's going to show the other person that you're listening, and it's going to build rapport. You will need to build rapport. I don't care what your summer job is this summer. You are either going to need to build rapport with the other Pilly who's in the room. You're going to need to build rapport with the staff, with your boss, with your supervisor. You might need to be building rapport with a client that you've been tasked with doing that intake with, right? If you're doing that like client focused work, you know, you're trying to get people to trust you by being like, you can trust me, right? By the way you ask questions and create space, you can do that. You can show people that you're trustworthy. You can show people that you're listening, and it conveys that you care, which is really, really helpful. The other skill that you all had brought up earlier that I want to talk about is summarization. Okay, so I want us to, we're going to do another pairs exercise. So grab the same partners, I think, because they were actually pretty close. But I'm going to have B gets to do most of the talking this time. So just keep your same pairs, A's and B. B, and for if you're online, go ahead and kind of just, you can just sort of think about what you might have said for this one. But B, I'd like you to tell A what the most dangerous animal is. Persuade them. Tell them what the most dangerous animal is. Go right ahead. Go. What's the most dangerous animal?
I don't know. Mosquitoes. I don't know. It depends how you want to define it. Persuade me. Yeah, persuade me. Is it like if there was one this animal and you facing off? What is like general was quite don't like ever pick one up. Okay, let's go with scary and dangerous. This is why I just saw he like walked up to the bison and the bison ignored that and like threw them aside. People think of like cows. They're like farm animals, right? They have milk. Feels very like
Wind up your persuasive argument.
So that's why I feel because like look, there's like a wolf, you know, like it's got like a polar bear.
All right, so we're gonna stop there. So now A, it's your turn. I want you to summarize back to B what they said. So go ahead and summarize it back.
Here's my So we finally narrowed the question down to what is the most dangerous animal. We decided bison. Because one, they're wild. Two, they're really big. Three, they don't make milk. Gotta go on top of them.
No, they do make milk, so they pull you into a sense of security. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Some milk cows and milk. Think of that as non-dangerous. When you're like a kid, you're like, what is that?
Oh, gotcha. So the real point was like psychs you out. Like it's not true.
That's how they get you.
All right, and we'll wrap that up. Come on back to center. If you had to move, you can go ahead and move back. If you're in the chat, if you're on the Zoom, go ahead and drop in the chat your scariest animals. Kind of just hear it. What were some of our more dangerous animals? What do we have? What were, just name me the animals. Cows, horses, wolverine. Somebody said mosquito. I know you did. I heard mosquito. Humans. Dark. Good and dark. Yeah. Cats. Cats and the, yeah. All right, so what was the impact for A, who did the summarizing? How did you decide what words to say back? How did you summarize? What'd you do? You could have guessed that's what I was going to ask you to do, but I didn't actually tell you that's what was going to happen next. So how did you do it? How did you summarize? Yeah.
She went through like a list of why they were dangerous, and I kind of just summed up the list. Like, okay, a snake is dangerous because they're sneaky, like, and then they're dangerous because of this. Like, I like that sneaky is
It is not the thing I'm most scared about snakes, but great. I mean, yeah, fear is real, you know? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they're sneaky, right? And so you just kind of summarized, you pulled that list in aggregate and said, these are the things that are scary about, that make snakes dangerous. Sneakiness. Yeah, okay. What else? How else did you do it? Y'all talked for a long time. So what, yeah, what'd you do?
In a way, I was like compartmentalizing as she was talking into like bullet points in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then like when I could tell that she was moving on to another reason, I'm like, okay, second bullet point.
So you were making a list.
Yeah.
Anybody use a different kind of technique? Mm-hmm.
So Michael, actually, before you even asked him to summarize, he asked like just one question that kind of punctuated the basis of what I was saying about spiders. it was something along the lines of they're not, or they're subtle, unlike you could have said a tiger or a lion, but spiders are sometimes in places where you need to be.
So we have a real fear of sneaky animals here. Yeah, okay, yeah. Also, spiders are in places you need to be is the most upsetting thing I've heard today. I'm living through a pandemic, so let's all sit with that truth. Watch that. Yeah, yeah, but so that just like, it was like this one thing in aggregate, right? Yeah, so you didn't talk as much as B though, right? A should have used less words than B. You didn't have to, but you probably did, because when we summarize, we use less words. B, what did it feel like to have your obviously accurate assessment of the most dangerous animal summarized back to you? How did that feel? Yeah.
Ashton pulled out a scary, accurate read of like why I was afraid of horses.
Oh,
you've been hurt by a horse.
Did the horse sneak up on you?
No, it was a blatant attack. But, no, but I felt very seen, that like he had kind of seen the fear like underlying like my reasons for why horses are extremely dangerous.
He pulled out like the core of the that you have a specific fear that makes you name them as most dangerous. And even though you didn't say it, he could hear it in what you were saying, kind of pulled out this other idea, gave it back to you, and you said it made you feel really seen. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
I think it was interesting when Mercedes was repeating what I said back to me. She used the same language that I used, but it made me realize that a lot of what I said was like filler language, you know? Because if it's that much harder to condense back to you, you know?
Yeah. What was your animal? Oh, they are dangerous. That is they will sneak up on you. I'm learning that I have a new fear about animals I didn't know. Yeah. Anybody else have a response to being summarized back to? Okay. There isn't like a right way to do it, but there are 3 distinct ways to do it. And I kind of heard those named, but I want to highlight them for you. So you can restate, right? Which is where you're kind of paraphrasing the facts back in your own words and kind of tracking where they were. You can do a reflection where you're sort of doing a grand reflection back to them. I think it's a little bit about what you were doing. You sort of pulled out this one thing about horses and reflected back like, this is real, right? Like some hard truths. And you can do what we call a grand summary, which I think is kind of what you were both talking about in the back, where you sort of pull together some of the big things. And then you can literally like just restate, right? Like just verbatim. And if you are in a conversation with a person who is repeating themselves, you have to give them their words back. That's the way to move that forward, right? If I'm saying you just don't know if it's the kind of bear that you should run from or make yourself small. You don't know if you should run or make yourself small. You don't know if sometimes you're supposed to run and sometimes you're supposed to make yourself small. And if you get it wrong, the bear will kill you. right? If you say to me, sounds like you're afraid of bears, that's not gonna get it, right? That's like not gonna cut it. It's not gonna come close enough. What you have to say back to me in that moment is, so it's what scares you about bears is that you can't tell, is it the bear where I'm supposed to run or make myself small? And sometimes just giving a person, they're like, oh, yes, you get me. This person gets me, right? Like just giving a person back their exact vocabulary can be really helpful. Sometimes when we're working in a mediation, I'll have a party that's just stuck. They're just stuck. They're like, she doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect me. I'm like, respect is important to you. They're like, she doesn't respect me. I'm like, what would respect look like? And that person's like, she doesn't respect me. And I'm like, you're saying that a lot. And actually what I do as a mediator at some point is say, I'm hearing you say she doesn't respect you over and over. What is it about that I'm not understanding? Right? Because that person they're trying to say something new. You don't get it, right? That's why they're repeating themselves, or they don't feel like you get it. And sometimes just saying, what am I not understanding about that, can help a person kind of like shake, right? Or help you see how you thought you were showing them you were listening, but they didn't know you were until that moment. So sometimes it can be really helpful to use that exact language back. So the other thing we talked about pretty early at the beginning that I want to talk about here at the end of our time together is emotions and how we engage in emotions work. When we are communicating, we are often faced with people with an emotional response, right? And when you are cool, if you're the kind of person that like, when you get mad, you kind of like actually get cool as ice and you don't have that's also an emotion, right? Like people, right? And for people who like come in hot, it's a really hard emotion to meet, actually. And so, people who are like hyper collaborators, who want to like talk about everything all the time and then end up for some reason marrying people who are conflict avoiders, who my wife is regularly like, this is not the hill I'm going to die on. I don't care where you keep the toilet paper. And I'm like, I think we should think critically about where it's kept so that we don't undermine one another's values all the time by putting it wherever we want, right? When I'm like saying that, I have to tell you how wild it was to do that bit with her in the next room the last few years. But yeah, right. Like, but for my wife, she's like, I don't care. This isn't important to me. And I'm like, oh, you put the toilet paper in the wrong place. You're my enemy, right? Like, I'm like, we talked about it. I explained why it was important to me. You made gestures like you understood, and then you just like put it on backwards, like that, right? And it's just a communication approach, right? She's like, I'm just not interested in this. It's actually, we'll probably make it, right? Because of that good dynamic. But when you are having an engagement with someone who's having an emotional experience, like, I'm going to say this, you're not their therapist, unless you are, right? Like some of you in this room might totally be therapists, but if you're not in a therapy, social worker role, right? And look, so much of lawyering is social work, right? Like direct client services, like we are not therapists. And so much of working with people in absolute crisis should be therapeutic, right? Like you are caring for people who are in a hard place. And you're sometimes working with people, like maybe you're not doing direct services, but your supervising attorney has a really difficult client, right? Like they're also having an emotional response. If I slam my phone down, I'm having an emotional response, right? Like it can manifest in a lot of different ways. So there are two ways that we can manage emotions. We can acknowledge them, which helps diffuse them and can remove obstacles. It can help when we're having like a stress response, an emotion response, right? Our cortisol's going up, our adrenaline is going up. And even when part of those hormones start to come down, some of them keep creeping up. So it's like the threat is over, but I'm still having a stress response, right? And so sometimes if someone's starting to have an emotional response that's kind of taking them out of the interaction, if you can acknowledge what is happening for them, put a name to it, it can kind of stop it in its track. And then sometimes what we do is we actually do explore emotions, ask people to talk about them, ask them questions about emotions in order to find out what's really important to them, right? If I'm furious that my staff member is always late and I'm super mad about it, right? It is worth naming for me, acknowledging the emotion. You are really angry that she is regularly late. why are you angry? Or what is it that makes you angry, right? That's the exploration piece, asking me a question about it. And why might I be angry that my employee is late? Why would I care? This isn't a secret lesson to tell you to be on time for things, by the way, it's just an example, but why might I care as a supervisor?
Lack of respect for your time.
Lack of respect for my time? Yeah, I think for me, anytime in my life where I've been feeling any kind of way about someone else's timeliness, I think it's because I wasn't actually angry. That's like my defensive posturing. I think I just feel disrespected, right? Like I think that's what's underneath it. And there is space to explore that, right? Because if I feel disrespected and my employee's like, I'm not disrespecting you. They changed my train schedule. And you've never said anything. And I didn't think it was a big deal. And I stay late all the time, right? Right. There's nothing intentionally disrespectful in there. That's really good data for me to have, right? So we can explore. Yeah. So absolutely worth kind of taking something apart. So there are different ways, different types of emotions that people express and different ways that they kind of show up. So Brandon, can I call you Brandon? Okay. So Brandon, we are best friends. All right. I'm going to call you on the phone. Okay. Yep. Phone rings. Yep. There it is. Hey.
Hello.
That's how you answer the phone for your best friend. Brandon, it's Ray. I just had the worst day.
What happened?
This dude fell asleep on me on the train. He fell asleep and then he was leaning on me and I didn't know what to do. And I just sat there and it was horrible. Okay. I mean 10 minutes, 3 stops on the blue line. Too long?
Did you say anything to him?
No, I just kind of wiggled my way out between him and the window and I got off the train. It was horrible. Of course not. This kind of thing only happens to women on the train. No?
Should I come over and we can talk later?
Yes, come over, bring pizza. Okay, thank you. Very good, Brandon. Okay, right here. What's your name? Annie. Annie, we're best friends. Bad news, Brandon. We're best friends. Okay, I'm gonna call you on the phone. But this one I'm not gonna look at you. It makes it a little easier. So I'm gonna call you on the phone. All right, it's ringing. Hey. I just had the worst day.
What happened?
My girlfriend broke up with me.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm really upset.
Do you need anything?
Probably ice cream.
What flavor?
All of the flavors. And then that Oatly chocolate one that's so good and tastes like real ice cream.
Yeah, that's really good. I can bring that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, great. You did, there we go. Good job, Annie. All right. Over here on the end. Rachel? Okay. I'm gonna not move out of the frame so they know that this class is still happening. There's a camera right there. Yeah. So Rachel, I'm gonna call you on the phone. Okay. We're best friends, of course, obviously. Yeah. So the phone's ringing. I'm having the worst day. I had the worst day.
Why, what happened?
My mom died.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
What can I do? What do you need?
I honestly have no idea what I need. I'm just in shock.
I'm so sorry. Can I come over and sit with you?
That would be great. Thank you.
Let's just sit together.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, bye. Okay, so I said the same thing in all 3 calls. How different does this room feel right now, though? Yeah. Seriously, right? I said the same thing in all 3 calls. I had the worst day, and the offer from my best friend at the end is the same in all 3 calls. I'm coming over, pizza, ice cream, stillness, right? The thing I requested, right? Right? So, right, I'm expressing an emotion and using the same vocabulary, but my voice is different. But almost more importantly, their responses are different. Brandon was a little curiouser than I might have been if I'd been having him read from a script. But, right, there was some curiosity there, right? We're exploring it. Now, what is really relevant here, and this goes to I think you were talking about this with the facial expressions at the very beginning. You have to meet me where I'm at, okay? If I call Rachel and say my mom has died and she's like, tell me more, how long did it last, right? If we get Brandon's interrogation, right? I'm like calling Annie, like I'm hanging up the phone, right? I'm out on that, right? That's really important. Also, as absurd and important is if I call Brandon and I say, some dude fell asleep on me on the train and he goes, do you need me to come over and just sit with you? Really, it's the wrong response. It's the wrong response, right? So that your face, your voice, your tone, your listening, your summarizing, your acknowledgement that something hard is happening for someone, you have to meet them where they're at. And this is also really important when we think about doing work from a trauma-informed lens, right? If someone is expressing, right, in a way that for you, if you were telling that story, you'd be weeping and they're not, you can't be like, why aren't you crying about it, right? You can't project that onto them, right? You have to hold good space for people and being able to like acknowledge that emotions and have an emotional response for what's happening at the time it's happening is so helpful, right? And they all met me where I was at, right? In that way. And so that's why that tone works really well. When we're acknowledging emotion, there's a few different vocabularies we can use. We can use some of that summarizing language. I hear you saying, it sounds like, it seems like, you appear, you sound, and some things to look for when someone's expressing an emotion, right? Repeating themselves. Usually people are not doing great when they're repeating themselves. A change in their tone of voice or their posture or their face. A change in their pace. Right? So like, think about how different our cadence was compared to our cadence, right? And ours is kind of started here, but ended in a little different place, right? The different cadences make a difference. And even a change in posture, right? Think of that woman I was telling you about earlier who went like this on a table and said, I don't sleep, right? Like that, she was clearly expressing an emotion to me. Now, what had happened right before she did that is that I was trying to name an emotion for her because she was clearly having an emotional response. She was shouting in a tiny room in the Skokie courthouse. She was shouting. And I was like, seems like you're in distress. And she was like, no. And I was like, you seem really angry. She was like, no. And I was like, you're mad? You know, and she was like, no. And like, she didn't want my words. Right? She didn't want my words for her feeling. And then when I said, how has this impacted you? She laid down on the table and started to cry and said, I don't sleep. And that honestly moved the conversation forward in a really big way. The last tool I want to talk to you about is the idea of reframing. Okay. So sometimes when a person is communicating and expressing something and it's got this really negative piece to it, if we can kind of flip the script, we can find something more actionable that we can work with. That is so big. So my favorite example is she's always late. I can't do a lot with she's always late, right? Being on time is important to you. That I can work with. Being on time is important with you, right? Like kind of flipping it in on itself can be really helpful. So there's an example there in the packet, right? Like, this is so stupid. We've tried talking about this before. All we do is argue, right? I can't, okay. You know, like I don't have anywhere to go with that. But if I reframe it, I can say something like, so it's important to you to not waste time arguing. And this is an opportunity for us to make progress, right? I can kind of flip it upside down. It's one of the last pages actually. So that idea of a reframe, I find really, really helpful when you're talking to people who are having a hard experience or maybe who you're having a hard time understanding, right? If you're in a conversation with someone, you're like, so this is what's important to you, you know, like kind of trying to figure it out. I also find that for myself and for my colleagues, giving myself a reframe and offering reframes to other people can be really helpful, especially when someone's having a kind of emotional or stress experience that's bringing them down. So one example is that I am sometimes overwhelmed by the amount of things that are expected of me, right? I'm stressed, like it causes me stress. To say that you are busy is boring, right? And to say I have a lot of things I have to do, okay, I don't really know where to go with that. A reframe that works really well for me on that is I have a lot of responsibilities. You know who else has a lot of responsibilities? Secretary of State. Like that makes me feel good about myself. I have a lot of responsibilities. You give people responsibility when you think that they can do things, right? So if someone's saying to you, I have so many things I have to do, I don't know why they keep asking me to do so many things, you might want to help them have a conversation where they prioritize their work or see if they can get something taken off their plate, or maybe there's a way you can support them. But offering a reframe technique early in the process to sort of shift the direction of the conversation, sounds like you have a lot of responsibilities, that can be really helpful. So that technique in particular, I think can really help frame when someone's having an experience that's really like kind of bringing them down into something that's a lot more actionable and a lot more forward thinking. I hope you have a wonderful summer. I don't know if you have just finished your first year or just finished your third year, but in whatever regards, you were incredibly courageous to attend virtual law school. I would have left. I don't know how you did it. And I don't know how you chose to go during the pandemic. And the profession needs more people of all kinds from all places doing all kinds of work. And I'm so glad you all are doing it and that you're here doing the public interest. On the last page of the packet, you have a digital PDF version as well. You'll find more information about the place where I work. If you want to learn more about training, if you go to Loyola, or Kent or Northwestern, we have clinic partnerships. So there are opportunities to do clinics and mediate with myself and my staff. If you have any questions for me, I think that my email address is on that packet. And if not, the staff at Pili can get it for you if you're interested and you want to know more about mediation or dispute resolution in Chicago or Cook County. I think you get a break until 3:30. Is there anything else you need to tell them, Brent?
Well, just if there are questions.
Yeah, I can stick around.
Yeah, or even right now for 5 minutes. You know, I have a break, but I always have room for questions in the break.
But I ended exactly on time.
But if people have questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay for questions, but also if you've been waiting to go to the bathroom, you know, you can get up too. So yeah, so thank you all so much. Really appreciate our time together.
So one wanted to pursue a career as a mediator, what would be a good first step?
First of all, it's not, that job alone is not a great job because mediating all day, every day is really hard and really, it would be like if you were a litigator and you only went to court full time. So I always encourage people to think about what kind of law or what kind of type of conflict might you be interested in. There are often dispute resolution courses of some kind in most law schools in Illinois, or you can find clinic opportunities. I recommend taking a training to see, honestly, if you like it. A lot of people think they're gonna like it and they get through the training and they're like, no one wanted my opinion? That was terrible, you know? So I also think that it's a wonderful training to have, even if you don't want to be a mediator, because when you work for your clients, sometimes resolving their dispute outside of court is the best advice you could give them, and knowing what kind of resources are out there are excellent. CCR's training is fantastic and, you know, the best. So I highly recommend our training. We do about 7 public trainings a year, and then we have partnerships with law schools and clinics that are opportunities. And then I would also, I would email me, and I'm happy to give you more details, connect you with a mediator in your area, and get some more information about what that looks like. So yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you do, like, or what tips do you have for like just summarizing and reframing in a way that also isn't like shutting them up in a way of like, yeah, I get what you're saying, like, let's move on.
Absolutely.
Like, still allowing them to
get
what they want, but also.
That's a great question. So 2 things, your tone of voice, right? You can't be me with Betsy at the beginning of the thing, right? So that you have like a really present, active listening voice. And 2, the other way to do it is to end that summarization with a question. So, because then it encourages them to continue talking. Yeah. And then they know that you're not just like trying to quiet them. And then sometimes if I am trying to quiet someone, I might say, I'm gonna stop you right there. You have said a lot, and I want to make sure that I understand everything that's happened. So I'm going to, and then I just say, I'm going to summarize back to you, right? Or here's what I heard you say, right? Like you can just name that. And I will literally use that to stop someone, right? If I've got a landlord tenant case and I'm like, tell me what brought you here today. And they're like, we met in 1987. I'm like, hold on, you know, like we're going to be here for a minute, right? And that's okay. You can, if you're building good rapport and you're present and you're creating a strong container for people to do hard work or ask questions or be listened to, they will often permit you a lot of grace if you're gentle with them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
To what, so I know you're obviously a mediator and have been talking about like mediation. I was curious about to what extent you think like the skills such as active listening and like the strategy on open versus closed questions would be better served if people like in actual litigation used it as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think it absolutely would. And I think that it
recommended in this, and I guess the follow-up is, do you actually recommend that individuals do it in the current system?
Yes.
Okay.
And most importantly, what I recommend is that law students take courses in this skill set so that they are better prepared, like they know what's important to their client, right? Like there is nothing worse than you saying to your client, what do you want? And they say $5,000 and you negotiate $5,000 for them. And they're like, I actually just want her to suffer. And it's like, what? I got you $5,000, you know? And then they won't take it. I've seen that. I've seen a poorly prepared client with their attorney in the mediation say, this is all I want. The lawyer's like, it's brass tacks, it's just this dollar amount. And then they get offered that and they won't accept it because that's not actually what they want. There's something else happening for them. So I recommend attorneys, whenever possible, working on these skills. It really helps with like direct client work and making sure you know what's really important to them. Yeah, because people in conflict don't know. I don't know. I'm really good at this stuff, but when I'm in a fight, like a year ago, I was in a fight with my sister and it ended with me swearing at her and throwing my phone across the room. But I'm a professional at conflict resolution. I mean, like when you're in the fight, you just don't know. Yeah.
Okay. If you're good, then we'll say now officially is your bathroom break. Come back around